Alright, I'm at the objective. I can't contribute vision, I can't engage. All I can do is deal damage and hope the rest goes well. And we've lost. Great. I love being an ADC at objectives. Definitely have a lot of agency here. We understand how frustrating it can be as a marksman to feel like you have no control over whether your team wins objectives or not, especially since the whole point of your role is to win team fights. But we're here to tell you that you actually have so much more control than you realize. But over 90% of low elo ADCs that we analyze all do one simple mistake that prevents them from securing objectives for their team. And that's precisely what we'll be covering in today's guide. We'll show you what game-losing mistake you may potentially be making and how to instantly fix it.
After all, this is what makes our teaching at SkillCapped so effective. We know how hard it is to climb in lower ranks with terrible teammates that feed the enemy and never listen to any of your calls. That's why we take the extra time and effort to actually test what we teach. You can see this every week on our website, where we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player shows you the tricks to climbing out of the exact rank you're stuck in. That's not all though, as we have over 280 of the highest quality courses you can find, taught by challenger experts covering every role and skill you need to learn in order to rank up. And if you're looking for something more personal instead, then we got you covered there too, with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. Now, if all this wasn't enough, we're also backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back. No questions asked. So what are you waiting for? You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Click the link in the description below and get that rank that you've always wanted. Alright, now before getting into knowing what to do at an objective, we first have to address, should you even go in the first place?
This is a critical problem a lot of lower elo players face. Objectives are important, but it's not like you can get every single one, so how can you know whether you should go to the fight or not? One of the first things we want to cover is that just because your teammates go to an objective doesn't mean that you should go as well. This is a really weird topic to cover because we get constant complaints about how bad your teammates are. But then, a ton of low elo ADCs just blindly follow their calls anyway. How does that make sense? Basically, if you think your teammates are trolling by contesting an objective, then just don't go. If they die, it's their fault. At the very least, you can trade a tower or another objective on the other side of the map to equalize things a bit, rather than dying as well. Like here, Heimer wants to contest Dragon on his own, but Vayne and her team are behind. She just doesn't go, and instead looks to collapse on the Alawi to get a free kill in top. As for how to actually tell whether you should go to an objective fight or not, here's some key notes. If you're down summoner spells, you don't have great peel versus super threatening dive champions, then you'll likely just die at the fight anyway. Yeah, there's ways around this with positioning and stuff, but if you feel like you're not going to contribute much to the fight anyway, then just don't go. Then there are situations where you feel like your team has no way of winning a fight based on how ahead your opponents are compared to how behind your team is. For example, the enemy Darius this game was a monster. Jinx's team even got a really solid engage, but it doesn't matter because Jinx can't even begin to threaten the Darius. He just runs through her entire team on his own. Then, when it comes to certain objectives like Dragon, remember that there's oftentimes no rush to contest every single one. If your opponents aren't threatening Dragon Soul, then it can often be better to wait and get a few more items to contest the soul rather than an individual dragon. You'll have a higher chance of winning that way. At the end of the day, just give it an actual think before going to an objective. This is the most important step that so many players neglect. Stop going to every single fight when there's plenty of other options you have available. You'll immediately be a much better player this way. With that covered, now let's discuss what you should actually do if you choose to contest an objective. And here's what literally almost every single ADC we review in low elo gets wrong. You'd assume that since you have the highest consistent DPS on your team that your job is to hit the objective, right? Wrong. This is why you lose so many objective encounters. Your job is to push waves, not sit around the objective. To understand why, let's think about the basic tactic everyone uses to get objectives. Technically, you should get there first to establish vision and control of the area, right? If you've watched other guides or received advice on objectives, everyone tells you to get to Dragon 30 seconds early to set up or something like that. The reason for that is simple. Take a look at this Twitch's game. His team is trying to contest the objective, but the other enemy team is already set up. When you're walking into the enemy team, you're at a disadvantage because you're walking into their vision, their skill shots, or other zoning abilities. If you've ever walked into a fight that a teamo has had time to set up for, then you'll know exactly how painful this can be. As a result, players tunnel vision on standing around an objective when it spawns, but this can often be really detrimental. For starters, you have to begin the objective. If you've committed all resources to setting up at the objective, then it goes without saying that you need to start it, otherwise, all of it was for naught. Raise your hands. How many times have you played solo queue, your team begins the objective, and you're just tanking a bunch of free damage from the Baron? Everything's becoming chaotic, and the game is thrown. Let me count. 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah, everyone's here. The point here is that you don't ever want to put you or your team in a situation where you have to begin the objective. That's a recipe for disaster, especially in solo queue. Some of you might argue, but vision control. Yeah, you'll get vision control by not being at the objective. Let's explain. If you're sitting as 5 on an objective, then the enemy team could just push in minion waves. Unless you can guarantee the objective by starting it, your own team will be forced off their own vision to go and defend. Then, the enemy team swoops in and takes control of the area. So, it should go without saying that if you're the one pushing, that the opposite is true. If you have mid push and you hover between mid and the objective, you can rotate to fight whenever possible. Better yet, it also makes it harder for the enemy team to contest your vision because someone on their team has to respond to the push. You see how this actually makes it easier for your own team to keep control, rather than just sitting with them at the Dragon or Baron pit? There's also another massive advantage you gain. If your opponents don't respond to the push, you can also ditch the objective and go for game-winning pushes on your own. Think about how often we've done guides where a challenger expert shows you how to do this. They have waves pushed before an objective and the enemy team doesn't respond. As a result, the ADC expert ditches their teammates and just pushes to win the game. This is why pushing waves before an objective is your main way to have agency over these fights. In team fights, all you can do is deal damage, resulting in low control over the outcome of the game. But by pushing waves, you give yourself way more options to punish enemy mistakes and put the outcome of the match into your own hands. Let's show you some examples of low elo ADCs who fail at this concept. You'll see just how easily they could have carried if they just pushed some waves. For starters, we have a Sivir who just pushed a mid wave, but decided to go get control over the spawning dragon. But her own team isn't even here yet. She's trying to defend no vision with just her and Zillion. Yes, being ready for an objective is good, but low elo players can often take it to the extreme, just like this Sivir. The enemy team just pushes her off the objective, giving them control over it. Now that the enemy team are the ones with control over the dragon, it's now on Sivir and her allies to walk into him. And, well, we've discussed how this is a problem. Walking into your opponents is conceding the advantage to them, which allows the enemy team to win this fight, giving them a chance to come back in the game. Just imagine for a moment that instead of going to the objective, Sivir had just stayed mid here. She had Baron and super minions at her disposal. Imagine how much pressure she could put by just pushing and buffing her own wave. Her opponents couldn't commit 5 players to Dragon this way. Her team arrives to get control, and they get the Dragon Soul for free this way. We can't emphasize just how OP it is to push waves, guys. Okay, let's see if you've learned your lesson. Test your knowledge on this next scenario. See if you got the crazy 200 IQ needed to figure out what to do. Miss Fortune is respawning from an earlier fight where both sides lost 3 members. Mundo has just pushed Garen off the dragon. With just that info, right now, what should Miss Fortune do to give her team the highest possibility to get this dragon? We know you didn't see this coming. She just has to go push mid. Let's see what she does next. She comes to dragon, realizes she can't do anything here yet, so she farms Gromp in the meantime. Then she sets up a pink ward because vision control is just so important. And what a shocking development. The enemy team just walks into the river and takes control over the objective. How could we have seen that coming? Just imagine if MF had gone mid and pushed the wave. Garen and Akali potentially have to respond, giving her own team more time to get here to set up her own control. But no, we have to go sit at the objective for no reason. We can't make it any clearer just how awful this is, and it's the reason so many games may potentially feel out of your own hands. Objectives are such a massive source of throws in every low elo game we watch. Whether it's overforcing, not setting them up correctly, or whatever it may be, players just lose so many games attempting to do Dragon or Baron, which brings us to the final point we want to make about them. Yes, objectives are important, but they should never be hard to take. It should be easy for you to take the objective, and very hard for your opponents to contest it. If you're ever doing an objective, and it feels like a struggle, then it was probably the wrong call. And you need to become much better at recognizing when it's going to be a bad call and just don't commit to it. Don't get us wrong. There's things like doing objectives when behind and taking risks to get back into the game, but in a standard game where you're even or ahead, then it shouldn't feel hard to start a Dragon or Baron. Instead of autopilot gravitating to objectives all the time, try setting plays up through pushing minion waves or other macro plays. Stop just going to an objective and then fighting a standard 5v5 fight. Of course, every game will feel like a coin flip. If you're doing the exact definition of a coin flip play, you have no agency over the match's outcome that way, and ultimately, so many of your leads will be thrown by doing so. Basically, the best way of taking objectives is to not care about them so much. Pushing minion waves to pressure your opponents is a much better way to get a free Dragon or Baron. It's also okay to concede objectives and look to cross-map something else instead. And stop following your teammates' horrid calls around objectives. If your teammates all suck, as players tend to say that they do, then why keep following their calls? We promise that the less you commit with your team around objectives, that the more often your team will succeed and inevitably get them. Use pressure to take them for free, rather than hoping to randomly win a 5v5 fight with 4 strangers on your team. You'll be shocked at how much more success you'll have at closing out games.
All right, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's kind of like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym, they'd go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week with over 2,000 guides curated into over 270 courses. No one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO hell over 1,100 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below.
Anyway, that's a wrap on this guide. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.